What's up, you beauties? Welcome to High and Wide Radio, episode 26 of season 5. My name is Jim Iacovone, and I'm joined by the one and only Jack Smith and boy wonder Travis Ballinghoff. If you're not listening live, please make sure to subscribe, follow, and listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. And if you're watching live, make sure to say hello in the comments. And if you have not yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, please be sure to do so. If you want to check out our site and maybe buy some merch while you listen to the show, you can head on over to hwhockey.net or find all of our social media links in one place over at who.be. That's HOO.be/HW hockey. And yeah, go follow us on all our socials and go buy some merch, guys. Thank you. Big episode, as big as you're going to get at this time of year if you're a Flyers fan. It's playoffs time. We're starting to do some prep for the draft, the NHL draft, which is in 2 months, May, June. What are we in? April still, guys?
Yes, there we are.
Yeah, so we got about a month and a half to the draft. Lottery's coming up in May, but we're starting to do some homework here, and we have who better than to bring on than Russ Cohen of Sportsology to talk prospects. He'll join us just about a half an hour. But first things first, ladies and gentlemen. Who wants to announce the news? Should it be me?
Yes. I think it should.
A Norris Trophy candidate has retired. It's a sad day in Philadelphia, but unfortunately, I think his time has come. Mr. Justin Braun has decided to retire. It's official today, because I think we've known this for a little while now, that he was going to retire, but officially announced today. Justin Braun has announced the end of his 13-year career. He spent the last 3 years now with the Flyers? Has it been 3 or 4? I should look this up.
I think 4, right? 1920.
Yeah.
21.
Wow. That was first year, yep.
Just gone so fast. He's grown up so fast with the Flyers. Wow. 1920. You're right. Had some respectable seasons. I think by now our listeners know how we feel about Justin Braun. The guy just did what was asked of him. I think he was respected around the league, respected in the locker room. This year, though, you could clearly see, I think even at the end of last year, you could see that, his time was coming, and it was coming pretty quick, because he's not necessarily an old guy. So 36, I guess, is up there, but he aged quickly, well, let's say. Does that sound right?
Yes.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. So, good for Justin Braun. Hell of a career. I mean, played alongside Erik Karlsson, I believe, in San Jose for a long time. Do I have that right? Who's Vlasic? Yeah.
There's a lot of good defensemen out there that he.
Yeah, Burnsy.
Yeah, that's who I'm thinking of. Brent Burns. That's who I'm thinking of. Yeah. So, I mean, he's played alongside some good deep pair partners and whatnot. Had a career year in 2017-18, 33 points, 5 goals, 28 assists. Known for a stay-at-home defensive guy. Justin Braun, congratulations on an admirable career. You guys have anything you want to add in for the previously known Norris Trophy candidate?
You hit it right on the head. I mean, he was a great shutdown defenseman for a long time. Him and Vlasic were shutting down opposing teams' top lines for many, many years. Wish the Sharks would have beat the Penguins in the Cup a couple years ago. Could have got his name on there, get a ring, but very, very good career.
Class act, what can I say? Unfortunately, never convinced third pairing defenseman is worth a second and a third, but that's a conversation for another day. Bringing him back, however, was the right move. He's, like I said, he's a class act. He does get into coaching or whatnot, that it's right here in Philly.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, he seems to like it for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Could have been that Philly was the only franchise that was going to give him a shot to, wrap up his career. That one more year just to see if I still got it. Maybe I get moved at the deadline or something. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Justin Braun, thank you for your service. Enjoy retirement.
He deserves a lot of credit. I'm going to say one more thing. He deserves a lot of credit because he's been a slow player for a handful of years now. And usually once you lose that first step, like, it can kind of come off the rails pretty quick. But he's just so good defensively and good positionally and all that fun stuff. Like, he was able to play a couple more years than I thought he would.
That's for sure. He's the Jamie Moyer of hockey.
I like that comparison. I was actually a Jamie Moyer fan
Mm-hmm.
I was too.
back in those days. All right, so without any further ado, let's get to the real juicy stuff here. So NHL playoffs, Stanley Cup playoffs. We're in the meat of the first round now, guys. I think every series has at least played 3 games, and I'll bring up our predictions here in just a second. But do either of you guys have the tree up, the playoff tree up? I'm looking at it here, but if one of you guys wants to take the reins and go through the series picks or what the scores are through the series, but you're my guest.
Start us off here while I get it up.
Okay.
Yeah, you got the Devils and Rangers are playing right now. Obviously, the Rangers took a 2-0 lead. Devils won the other night. Devils are leading 1-0 right now. That was a series where I thought I was going to eat some crow. At least the Devils are making it interesting. That series started, the more I was like, oh, geez, the Devils don't have the experience. Rangers they're battle hardened. They could have easily went to the Cup. What was I thinking? Give it another year. At least the Devils are making something of it. Tampa also playing tonight. Toronto also playing tonight against Tampa. They're up 2-1 after their shellacking. I love that because I'm a big Matthews fan, mostly because of fantasy. However, fans of fan. It's so weird. 7-3 loss, 7-3 win, or very close, similar scores. And they're leading in the series, but the Tampa's leading 1-0 in that game right now. I do have Toronto finalized that round. I think most of us do, if not all of us. Toronto.
Jim's a big Tampa guy.
Yeah, I keep doing that. Oh yeah. Well, I can't blame you. Like they were good for so long. I just want to, get through. The Toronto doesn't bother me like it bothers. There's so many other teams bother me before Toronto. So I would like to see them finally break through. I do think they got dealt a pretty shitty hand having to play Tampa almost every single time in the first round because of the goofy playoffs that is the NHL. Hurricanes and Islanders. I don't know many people. I guess, does anybody pick the Islanders that we know of?
I don't think so.
Pretty easy one. I mean, yeah, sure, the Islanders, because not the Islanders of old. I think we all know that. Hurricanes lead that 3-1. Bruins, Panthers also 3-1. There's the only good story coming out of there is the old Lion, making himself known, I guess, for a little while there. But Bob was in the other night. Golden Knights, Jets. Knights up 2-1. I had the Golden Knights. I guess that's good. Avalanche Kraken was interesting. With the Kraken winning game 1, and then I think they were up like 2-0 in game 2, and then it's been Colorado ever since. Essentially, Colorado leads 2-1. Stars and Wild, that's a fun series. 2-2 right now. I picked the Stars. I think most people picked Minnesota. Seemed to be like the favorite to pick of. I don't even want to know if I called it an upset at that point, but that's still tied at 2, and probably one of the best series going right now. Oilers and Kings 2-2. Looking like they were in serious trouble the other night. I think at one point it was 3-0, and then they were down again. They raced through 2 deficits. That series is currently at 2. I said it earlier. I still think it's possible. Whoever wins that series is going to go far in the playoffs. I'm hoping it's Edmonton because but yeah, the first round never disappoints. I'll give them that. And that's where the most games are played. It's craziness. It's awesome. Playoff hockey.
I would agree, and that's why I love the first round, because I feel like after the first round, you don't see as much crazy stuff happen. Like right now, you're seeing all guys getting beat up and crazy hits, and guys are getting hurt. Whereas once teams make that second round, you don't see as many fights. I feel like guys are like, okay, we're 2 series away from the big one. Let's let's drill down here and, really make a run. Or maybe it's just that the first round takes so much out of you. You just don't have the same, desire to beat the shit out of somebody. You get the shit beat out of you, whatever.
I think that's true for some teams. For example.
Yeah. That's why I love the first round though, because look at even for example, this is maybe one of the more boring series. I'm actually enjoying it. The Dallas and Minnesota series. That hit Foligno put on, I think it was Hakanpää last night. That's a controversial thing. All of a sudden, some bad blood gets stirred up. Let's see what happens there. 3 games left in that series. Toronto, Tampa Bay. Dude, you had Kyle Dubas yelling at somebody. Like, come on. I love that, dude. What'd you guys
that
think
was
of
awesome.
that?
People are like really complaining about that. I'm like, if that was my GM, I would. You think Hextall or Fletcher would be doing that? Come on, they'd be stones. Like, they'd be boards up there. Like, I love that. He knows it. His job's on the line. Come on, man. Like, of course he's gonna be like, come on, it's hockey. We forget it was hockey at some point. All these people getting bent out of shape over everything blows my mind.
I mean, don't you want your general manager to have just as much fire and passion as the team? Like, come on. Like, I loved seeing that. So I won't get into that, but words don't necessarily hurt people. I mean, it's just, have fun, do your thing. As long as you're not getting a little nuts, have fun. And that's what it looked like to me. It looked like everybody was having fun. Any series so far, guys, that you've been surprised how it's been playing out, Trav? You want to start that off?
I can't believe how well the Kraken are playing the Avalanche. I think I picked that to be done in 4. I was expecting an Avalanche sweep. I mean, the first period, like the Kraken are out like every game, it feels like.
Yeah.
And I guess it was the last game, Tanev started blowing kisses to the fans after that goal to put them up 2-0. And that, I don't want to say bulletin board material, but that just like changed the switch, and the Avalanche were like, we're not losing this game. The Avs are so fun to watch how quick they are. I'm a big Bowen Byram and Cale Makar fan. The Panthers, I feel like, have actually played okay. I kind of thought the Bruins would run them out of the building, and I know that series is 3-1, but the Panthers have the first 2 games, I would say, they played pretty decent, better than I thought they would. So that's where I'd say I'm surprised. Got the Maple Leafs on right now, really pulling hard for them. And lastly, the Carolina Hurricanes. I mean, what they're doing without 3 of their top 6 players is pretty damn impressive.
Yeah, and I'll add what you kind of Jack Hughes did something similar. He wasn't blowing kisses or anything tonight. He just kind of like no celebration, just stared at the crowd. It was like Rangers crowd. I was like, I don't know what that was about, but you are losing in the series. It was the first goal of the game. It wasn't an overtime goal or nothing. I'm curious how that's going to pan out. Definitely curious.
The which one was this? The Devils Rangers or the
Devils
Seattle?
Rangers tonight that happened. He just stared him down. Tanev was Kraken Avalanche.
Yeah, so both of these series are I got to be honest, more interesting than I thought that they were going to be. I mean, we were talking about how, Rangers Devils is, it's cool that they're both playing each other, but you just had, I'll just speak for myself that I thought the Devils, they're not really a heavy team yet. They're very, very skilled and they're a good hockey team. But when I see them matched up with the Rangers, I'm like, oh, I wonder how this is going to go. Is this going to be a 5-game series, 6-game series? We'll see. But the Avalanche Kraken, I think I expected that to be a quick one too. And Trav, you're right. Seattle's playing them tough. Like they're not giving them anything easy. And Grubauer's not – I don't think he had a good regular season, Grubauer, but he looks pretty good right now, doesn't he?
Yep.
One of those series, like I don't think I picked any sweeps. It's hard to pick a sweep. I don't understand why that would be a sweep, but something about Kraken we're playing the season, and I just feel like I dislike Hacksaw that he's going to make it difficult. He's going to Gabe Kapler this and like last and linger around as long as possible. And you see it already. Oh, he was actually really good here when he was the Flyers. Like here comes the ridiculous takes. Like so they've gotten swept, but I knew it wasn't going to happen. I think I picked most of my series in 6 and 7. Even New Jersey, I had them pulling it off in 7. And it's kind of like what you said before, Jim. Like, is this what you think or is this what you want? And for me, it was like, this is what I want. That was my one series where I'm like, I'm hopeful. Probably going to bite me in the ass, but whatever.
See, there's a couple series like that for me. So Tampa and Toronto was one of them. If Toronto won, I wouldn't be mad. Like while I'm watching these games, I find myself rooting for Toronto, but I picked Tampa Bay. And what's the other series? Sort of the same thing with New York and New Jersey. I'll never, ever, ever root for the Rangers, but I picked them, I want New Jersey to win, but I can't stand New York. So, I'm rooting against myself in terms of playoff bracket picking.
It is tough because for a while I was like updating my New York friends with how their team was doing, and now they're like talking like they're me, and it's like you still don't know I bet you if I asked the player you just name dropped, I think because he had an assist or something, I bet you wouldn't know if he played offense or defense. I bet you really wouldn't know. That's what I deal with New York, and it's irritating. It's like,
Yeah.
Hey, how's this guy? Now it's like, oh, our team's the greatest. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, because they all come out of the woodworks and whatever.
Oh,
All of a
let me
sudden,
tell
they're
you.
the biggest Ranger fan in the world. Typical.
The tags are still hanging off the jerseys they got.
Can we talk about this for a second? So Ben D commented, McDavid is unstoppable. And I got to say, the Los Angeles Kings are doing a hell of a job specifically against McDavid. They're having a tough time with, it's 2-2, but here's what I want to talk about a little bit. And there's a counter argument. I'm not going to give it to you guys. I'm going to let you figure it out for yourself. But McDavid, best player in the world, all but being shut down right now by the Los Angeles Kings, right? I think he's got 1 point or 2 points. At least I think it's 1 even strength point, which, points are points. So if you get him on the power play, that's fine. I thought it was interesting, though, the guys that scored the biggest goals for them, they traded for. Or I think Hyman was a free agent. Evander Kane was a trade, or was he a signing?
It was a trade, but they re-signed him.
Okay. Scored that huge, not talked about enough, third period goal with 3 minutes left. I mean, the Oilers are down 3-1 and are likely looking at, I think they were talking about during the game yesterday that after this game 4, they have 3 days off before their next game, which is unheard of. Los Angeles was going to give them everything they had in that game to eliminate them, right? Because they had 3 days to rest. So Evander Kane scores that massive goal to send it into overtime. Doesn't get the credit he deserves, in my opinion, right? Because let's face it, he's not a great dude, yada, yada. Hell of a goal. And Zach Hyman, who seems to do this, at least in my mind, anytime they need a big goal, he scores it, So
he's that kind of player, man. He's like their Kreider or something. Like,
yeah, that's a good comparison.
I had him in fantasy, and he did a lot better than I thought he was going to do because he just seemed like a guy who played with a lot of talent in Toronto, signs a big deal elsewhere, and he wasn't going to be worth it. And that is not the case at all.
So what are you guys seeing with McDavid? Because Ben has McDavid's unstoppable here, but from what I've seen, Los Angeles is doing an outstanding job containing McDavid, in my opinion.
I still think he's a point per game.
Texted last. Oh, my bad. I actually texted last night, like when they were down 3-0. Like, is McDavid going to do something or what? He's being invisible, man.
Yeah, but he had 3 assists after probably right when you said that, like after that. And I think he might have had 1 more assist. I know he had a goal the other. But you're right. Like the first game or 2, I think he was held off the score sheet. Draisaitl's still. He leads in points for the playoffs with 9, and he's tied in goals with 5. So a lot of that has to do with McDavid, whether they're over focusing on him and it's leaving others open potentially, because that's his line, mate. Like it's power play, whatnot. Like it's not like the other lower lines are getting it done. It's not like Yamamoto's lighting it up or something. Pick your player. No, it's the top guys are still getting it done, and I think I expect him to be getting like 3-point nights here and there, like every game, 4-point nights, more goals. Yeah, maybe he just took a little bit to get going. It's a really tough series. These guys played before, so there's some bad blood there. If he does get this night, maybe the series doesn't go the way we think it has or has started to this way. Maybe they finally do start to pull away. It's hard to say. There's definitely something for the first 2 games, but I think he's starting to come out of it a little bit. But this talent and skill is still there. They're just over, like they're heavily focusing on him. I believe that's leaving others to they can't close out games. Like they've had leads before that Oilers either brought it close. I think all the Oilers losses were in overtime as well. These are really tight, close games. They've blown leads. So, I mean, how much of that is they're over focusing on one guy versus they're not closing, worrying about their own? It's really tough. There's a lot going on in this series. And if McDavid really gets going, I think it could end in the next two.
Yeah, I actually do think he's going to get going here. I kind of think we're already in the process of seeing that. First 2 games, he didn't look great. Third game, scored a couple nice goals, and then last night started slow for that whole team, but they went on a tear, including himself. So I think we're going to get vintage McDavid the rest of the series. But you got to give credit to the Kings. I mean, they might be like the best defensive team in the league with how easy they defend, and you got Kopitar and down the middle. Like it's going to be hard to score against that team.
That's for sure.
I of course, I have to mention Bouchard. He's been very good.
Yeah, Bouchard's nice.
He's very good. He's got
all right, Andrew.
An absolute.
Yeah,
what happened?
That comment.
Did I miss the comment?
He's right though. He's right. I remember when he was drafted. I was a Bouchard fan. So yes,
do you have corn cobs in your eye socket to mention
I've never
Bouchard?
heard that before, but I love it.
Well, I mean, he's right. He's right because he adds a whole. I mean, he made Tyson Barrie expendable, right? Their power play is. It's the most. Help me out. It's the most feared power play ever in the history of the NHL, right? Like it had the highest percentage this year. It was like 33% or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think in large part to Bouchard. So, Andrew, thank you for clearing the corn cobs from our eyes. You are correct. And yes, we should have mentioned Bouchard. So thank you for that. This is why it's great to have people chiming in and reminding us who we're forgetting here. So, I mean, this is another example of, I picked Edmonton, but I'm rooting for Los Angeles when I'm watching these games, So I feel like there's a bunch of series like this. Let's talk more about you guys talked about Toronto, Tampa already.
I just like
this game. Toronto looks terrible. They looked pretty bad last game too. They got lucky to get out of there with a win. They looked awful
Tampa,
in
right?
that first period. Yep.
Interesting. I thought. What was the score of that last game? Was it it was an overtime game, right? Was it OT?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So interesting because they were getting kind of beat up for most of that game. I think they were outshot by like 13, 15 shots, something like that. I don't know. They didn't look very convincing to me. I feel like, which they didn't really need to be. All you got to do is sneak out a win in Tampa and go back home to Toronto. I don't know.
Their forecheck looks terrible.
Yeah.
They're having trouble breaking pucks out of their zone. And it's like when they do, I mean, they're coming down the ice, getting one shot, low percentage chance, and then Tampa's going the other way. They're having a real tough time.
That's unfortunate. What do you think it is with them? I mean, Tampa just has better depth, you think?
I'd say for Toronto's defense, I mean, Riley's really like the only puck mover they have back there. I don't know. I don't hate the Leafs' depth.
Yeah, I mean, there's goaltending's, definitely heavily in favor of Tampa.
Yes.
They always come up with these players like these Russ Coltons and Radish, and they always are. They're not as great as they were, obviously, where they lost an entire line worth of good players. But they always have these guys that can fill in. And to be honest, Victor Hedman is like one of the best defensemen I've seen since like Lidstrom. It'd be hard pressed to find somebody you put up there like better than him. That and Stamkos is still out there with the Kucherov, and they're just in point. Like they still got their stack guys who have won cups, been through long playoff series where Toronto's still trying to get it going. Ryan O'Reilly was a good pickup for them though. So I mean, I'm hoping that they might drop tonight's game, but I'm hoping if they do power through, that could be the difference. So it's going to be tight. It's going to be tough.
So we had a question from Andrew here. Are you guys in favor of the Wild or the Stars? And I showed the Eastern Conference banner. So let me get to the Western Conference one. There you go. So I think we all had the same. We're all in favor of the Stars for this series here. And that's 2-2 as well, right?
Yes.
That's actually one of my favorite. The entire playoffs, I think, have been great. Each series has there's no stinkers. The Stars Wild, maybe you could argue, is a little bit more mild than some of these other ones, but it's like it's like the Cold War. There's like really nothing really going on. All of a sudden, it's 2-1, 3-2, which was kind of the case last night, and Stars were able to tie that one up there.
Well, the weird thing is, like, it felt like after Pavelski got plastered, like, Dallas came back and, they won the game, and then it looked like they were like, okay, that's all we have left. But then they tie the series up. Like, I don't know which team I'm going to see out of Dallas. And I look at guys like Jason Robertson and whatnot. Like, I like Dallas better, and Jake Ottinger. Like, I like that team better. They're the higher seed. I felt Minnesota was everybody's favorite to upset because they're obviously a lot closer. But I think Dallas will win that series. And the way it's gone, I don't know what's Dallas team I'm going to get. The series is tied at 2. The first game was like a double overtime game, the loss, and then they come out and smoke them 7-3. The Stars beat the Wild. And then the Wild turn around and win 5-1. Like, these scores are out of control. Like, how does Tampa and Toronto, same deal, 7-3 then 7-2. Like, I don't remember seeing anything like that before.
I was expecting the Stars to come out and look more like they did against Calgary last playoffs, and they don't really look the same as last year. They were very tough to play against. Ottinger, of course, should have won them that. I think it was a game 7, correct? Last year when Ottinger had like 40 some odd saves and ended up losing still.
Mm-hmm.
I was expecting him to have a monster playoffs, and he's playing good, but I was expecting him to play like he did last year, whereas I wasn't really expecting much out of Minnesota. To tell you the truth, I underrated them a little bit, I think. Did you guys do that too when you picked the Stars?
Probably a little bit. I'm still not very high on the Wild. You do have to mention the injury to Pavelski really hurts the Stars, but you also got to give credit to Tyler Seguin. He's been awesome. And this is a guy who maybe like a year ago, I thought, he was on the decline for sure. But
how many times
he's had a really good series as well.
How many times the GM called him out too? Like him and what's his name? But like he's been under the bus, even in going back to his time in Boston as a young kid. So it's like he's another one. Like, and it says right in the chat there, like, will he be consistent? It just goes with the Dallas. I have no idea. But when I look at them on paper, they're more impressive to me than the Wild. And I say that obviously, but Kaprizov playing for the Wild. But I just feel like they have more talent all around, including in net. But I was surprised all three of us picked the Stars because I was seeing a lot of people take Minnesota in that first round. The series has gone that way. It's tied. It's close. Each team's got a blowout win. Each team's got a very close win.
Yeah, we just great minds think alike. Especially when it came to our picks. I think we only had like 2 series where we picked opposite teams. So it's kind of funny actually. And every series has been even. It's all you could flip a coin, with all these series. And I think that's what's most fun about the first round is you just never know how things are going to go. But ladies and gentlemen, before we go any further, it is just about 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And our special guest is backstage. We're going to bring him in right now. The great Mr. Russ Cohen of Sportsology. Russ, thanks for hanging out. How are you?
Good, James. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for taking the time. We're really looking forward to talking some prospects with you.
Yeah. Anytime. Love it.
So obviously we don't know how or where the Flyers are going to draft yet. The lottery has yet to commence, but we're going to assume that it's going to be somewhere in the top 10. And obviously you're doing great things everywhere. I mean, where can't you find you these days? But I've been watching a lot of your elite prospect stuff here. The meetings, I think you guys are doing the monthly meetings. And if you guys haven't seen this stuff, it's on YouTube, Elite Prospects 2023 NHL Draft Meetings. They just had one in March. Are you guys going to do another one of those before?
Yeah, another draft? One's coming. I think like after the under 18s and probably after the playoffs are over, I think.
Yeah, I can't get enough. I think I'm watching the second one. I'm watching this for the second time here. It's about 2.5 hours long. perfect to put on, while you're working, put it on in the background.
Yep.
You learn a lot from you guys. It's really great content.
It is.
But yeah, I have your sportsology.com site up right here, your 2023 NHL Draft Top 45 version 3.0. And before we get started here, these are your rankings, not a mock draft, correct?
Yeah, it's important to say just because I'll only do one mock draft a year. I'll do it for full press coverage, full press hockey. They'll get my one. I don't love doing them. They know that, so that's why I do one. Because a lot of times, one trade, a lot of things can go out of whack with it pretty quick. It's kind of like those NCAA brackets on the first weekend,
Yeah.
So same thing. I like rankings because everything takes like 3 to 5 years for it to shake out, and my rankings they always stay up. So like those rankings are up there. Stuff that I did on Hockey Prospect Radio is still in perpetuity. So you could always find my rankings. Like it doesn't matter if I've done great, I've done horrible. I always leave them up there, and I kind of look at them every 3 because I want to see how I do, And so I always kind of judge myself. So I'm my harshest critic when it comes to that.
Well, I know we certainly follow you, and I don't want to speak for Jack here, but I know Jack's followed you long before.
Jack should follow me, but if he doesn't, that's it's on him.
I built my fantasy team around your picks. Beautiful.
But okay, let's get into your top 10 here, Russ.
Let me move my cat out. Sorry.
Oh yeah, sure. Special guest. No worries. Yeah, I'm excited to get into this to Russ's top 10 because the guy that I like most, Russ has at 10 here. Where do you guys actually want to start with Russ? Do you want to start at 1 with Connor Bedard, who we kind of already know? Or do you want to start out with 10 and work our way down? We'll do 5 this episode and 5.
I couldn't find her, and then she found me. So
there you go. So where do you guys want to start? Do you want to start at the back with 10, or do you want to start at the front? We'll do 5 this episode, Russ, and maybe talk 5 more next week if that's okay
fine
with you. So where would you like to start? Would you rather start 1 or 10?
We can go with 10. I mean, a guy like Ryan Leonard, I think I've seen him 5-6 times live this year. Really good player, strong, wins corner battles. It's like 5'10", but he's kind of ripped like a Jack Eichel was back when he's not the same height or anything, but very muscular, very in shape, strong, going to get stronger. Takes corner battles personally. That's something that he told me. He scores goals. He knows how to get to the net, but he also plays a good all-around game. He can play either side of the wing, which I think is important because a lot of times teams, if they get a guy and he's versatile, he may, start off at one spot because they have a need and then end up switching over. It's a valuable thing to have. Matt Coronado is another guy who's drafted a couple of years ago that's on Calgary now. He would play both wings. It's not as common as you think. So when guys tell me that, I make sure I highlight it because it's a nice thing that clubs like. But he could score, he could skate, he plays a two-way game. He's a smart player with the NTDP. Anybody'd be happy to get him. Anybody.
So people have been kind of calling me crazy the last couple of weeks because I've been trying to brush up on my prospect stuff here. And when I watch some of the clips or even, some of the games that Ryan Leonard plays, and I'm like, this is a guy that I would like to have on the Flyers, and obviously the first thing that crops up is, what are you, nuts? That's another right winger, right? But watching him, he doesn't always play the right wing. Sometimes it looks like he's playing the center position, and obviously, like you said, he could play on the left side. Would it be crazy to want the Flyers to draft him, wherever they may end up picking?
No, it wouldn't be crazy. I think here's something that happens with fans. So they read a lot of different pundits. They look at a lot of different lists. They decide based on these lists what they like and where a guy should be. But that really shouldn't matter in the grand scheme of it. What should matter in the grand scheme of it is how would he fit in with the team?
Right.
I'm going to say still how would he fit in with the coach because I think the coach might still be there when he makes it to the NHL because he's an exceptional player. So how would he fit in with that coach eventually? How, what kind of team need is there? Is he one of the best players on the board? If you've got mostly yeses to those answers, then he's a player you have to consider there. And that's why you have, 4 4 or 5 people speaking at a table at once because they say, okay, this pick is coming up. And I know, I mean, I do pre and post for Sirius. So like last year we were right across from the Flyers table and the Kraken. So as an example, when Shane Wright wasn't picked, I saw them going into extreme discussion mode to decide what they were going to do with that 4th pick because they weren't expecting Shane Wright to be there. And that's the kind of things that you have to be ready for at the table if something like falls in your lap. So, fans are always like, well, take the guy who falls, but you don't always want to take the guy who falls. Like sometimes the right guy is the right guy. Don't worry about the number so much. Worry about if it's the right guy.
Russ, since we're on the topic a little bit, I just wanted to ask, do fans, particularly when you're drafting top 5, top 10, even top 15, do they put a little too much stock into what position a player plays? How much is best player available versus need when these guys could be like 5 years away?
Right.
Usually when they're not that soon in the draft, it's usually faster, but still.
No, but on average, you're right. Here's the way you have to look at it. If it's a center or if it's someone that you think can play top pairing, those are really sought after positions. Now, again, if a guy plays center, if he's a top line center, well, I'm going to give him really high priority. If he's a third line center, well, doesn't mean as much to me. But if someone's a top pairing defenseman, that's one of the top positions I'm looking for. So I'm still going to try and take the best player available. But let's face it, in the cap world, sometimes teams take out of need. And we've seen the Flyers pick out of need more than a few times already. So I don't know what they'll do this year because they have a little bit of different direction, even though Brent's still the same guy there with Danny making the final choice if he's the guy who does it. And it seems like he'll be, that could change. But it really depends on who's on the board. Like I'm a big who's on the board guy. I have to know who is there and what are my choices. And, my famous, for the Flyers choices, Cole Caulfield was on the board more than once and they didn't take him. And that to me was just crazy. Like I just didn't understand it. We'll never understand it. But that's the thing. I always want to look at who's on the board.
And going back to last year, I know that, they took Cutter Gauthier over Jarek, and I thought that's who they were, and they kind of surprised me with Cutter. And I know how you feel about it as well, and I kind of agree. I mean, ultimately time will tell, but, you talk about franchise defensemen, and also this talent as well. Like, that's why I'm not sure, why they, especially that high. I was top 5. Like, when you look at need there, based on who's on the board, you got somebody right there I feel like you can never have enough defensemen.
No, you can't. And I'm not sure the Flyers have learned that yet, to be honest. But the thing is, I love Cutter Gauthier. It's just one of these things where if you can get a guy like Jiricek, he's just a unicorn. And you can see he already ripped through the AHL this year. He played at the end of the season in the NHL, probably starts the NHL next year. He's going to be a top pairing guy eventually. That kind of guy, he could, he can cover half the ice for you for a lot of the game. I mean, Gauthier just can't do that just based on his position. So now the gamble they took is that Gauthier will be a center like that. So, but again, if Cutter Gauthier turns out to be a second line center and David Jiricek's a top pairing defenseman, you still got a really good player, but you maybe should have taken the other guy based on the way that shook out. I tell you, Gauthier had a really good year. He was over 50% on faceoffs, but he wasn't dominant like Danny Briere said he was dominant at the end, at the last media session. Adam Fantilli was dominant. Go look at his numbers. Those are dominant numbers. Gauthier's were really good. Don't get me wrong. For a freshman, they were terrific, but Fantilli's not only a freshman, but he's younger than Gauthier. So to me, that's true dominance. And I guess I'm nitpicking at the word, but I'm just trying to show differences between like good and great. Gauthier was really good. Fantilli was great. Fantilli's on a little higher arc, right? So you could just see that. We don't know about these two. Like you said, time will tell on that.
Yeah, I mean, and you brought up Cole Caulfield. It's well documented how I felt about that draft, huh, Jim?
I wish I got to put the video up here so I can show you the video one day, Russ. Next week I'll have the video, Jack.
I'd love to see it.
melting into the floor. I've never seen someone melt into the floor like that in my life. Just total dejection. Like he couldn't believe it. I don't think anybody could, but Jack's reaction was the best.
Like you said, Russ, not once, but twice.
Right. That's the kicker of it. Like you do it once, you say, all right, I guess it's a situation where they didn't love him, but then they had a chance to do it again after trading down. It's like, how do you not do that?
And then he goes the very next pick.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move along here. So at number 9 on your list here, which I got to be honest, with all the names that are kind of flying around, Ryan Leonard, Oliver Moore, Dvorsky, Benson, I think a guy that a lot of people leave out in the conversation is who you have at number 9 in Quentin Musty.
Yeah. Well, one reason is he's in Sudbury, and Sudbury's not like the media capital of the world. A lot of guys who scout there scout at the beginning of the year and maybe at the end of the year. They don't go when it's like 3 feet of snow there. Wow. And Quentin told me, I interviewed him for Elite Prospects, and he told me, yeah, it's even colder than Buffalo. He said Buffalo's nothing like this. They wouldn't even. There was a point in the season this year where they wouldn't let people out on the streets because it was like minus 30.
Oh my God!
Fahrenheit. It's minus 30 Celsius, I think. Well, no, I think he said Fahrenheit because he's still an American, so I think he did translate it. But minus 30, couldn't go out. You're not allowed to walk the streets. So he doesn't get the media attention that I think he deserves right now. And I did have him probably around 12 or 13 on my last sheet. But the problem is, as I compress the sheet and the talent compresses, I'm not going to get to see him anymore this year. Some of these other guys I am with the under 18, so I do try and take into count recency bias and stuff, and I try and look at what I've written about a guy the whole year. And the thing about Musty, what kept coming up was not only is he a power forward, but he's a different kind of power forward, and so basically I think he's going to sort of set a new trend for power forwards because he's a power forward that can still get behind you with speed, get behind a team defense with speed. He'll take a stretch pass and go and get on a 2-on-1. Like that's something you don't see a lot of power forwards do. A lot of them are really good. They've got their 10-foot, 12-foot area around the net that they're good at, but maybe don't play this overall game or even try and do a track meet. His speed's really good. His two-way game is excellent. Really good one-timer, but a better wrist shot. And he just says, there's not enough opportunities in today's game where it's tight to do a one-timer unless it's on the power play. So he likes that hard wrist shot. He does it. He's a big kid. He's going to be well over 200 pounds. He's not right now because he's got to put weight on. So you got to wait for him to do that because when he's, going to be like 200 pounds or whatever, he's going to be a lot to deal with. So he's the kind of guy that every team would want. Not just the Flyers, but every team, because he's got a definite second line trajectory and maybe a first line, depending on how much the hands develop and just the strength. Because if all of a sudden the strength does that and the physical game's going, plus he's a risk speed wise, that's really good. Something I had gotten on the Flyers for early this year was, and really during Chuck's tenure, even as early as a couple of years ago, he said we wanted to get bigger and hard to play against. Okay, getting bigger and hard to play against are great things, but you still need to be faster and you still need to score at some point. They weren't that. They were just bigger and hard to play against.
Yeah.
This guy's bigger, hard to play against, fast, and could score. That's what you really want in today's game, not the other thing, because the other thing, you see there's just too many limitations. You can have a couple guys like that, fine. So at any rate, I like him. As you heard Danny Briere say, left wing's kind of weak at the NHL level. I think it's not great in their system, depending on who ends up as a left winger. So he's a guy, he's from Buffalo. So I think what's going to happen with him is he's going to get a considerable amount of press coverage when we're all at the Combine. At the Combine in Buffalo, that's his home rink. He has played in that rink more than anybody. So, he's going to talk about that place, that area. He's going to be a physical guy on the floor as far as exercising. He's going to show off his wares. He thinks he's going to do well with that. And if he does, he's going to maybe get that extra push at the end there. And so we'll see. But he's been training for the Combine. He told me that.
As you're talking about Quentin Musty here, I'm looking at the top 10, and is it fair to say, I mean, I'm even going to scroll down to 13, 14, 15, even to pick 20 in your rankings here. Is it fair to say that this draft is absolutely loaded with talent, and
Yeah.
you could pick back as far as 20 and get a really, really, even I'm looking at Jaden Perron at 24 here. I mean, you could get a really good player. It's not just, don't get me wrong, because Connor Bedard's in a class of his own.
Sure.
Then you have Fantilli, Carls. I mean, there's a reason why these are the top 4 names mentioned, but you can get a really good player, mid first round in this draft, especially late in the top 10.
Question. Like, Gavin Brindley at 21, even if he goes a little higher, hell of a talent. I mean, people could have watched him in Lehigh a few weeks ago like I did. Hell of a talent. I've seen him, mid-season, end of the season, pressure situations, all kind of situations. Yeah, I would love to have that guy on my team, and I think he, his arc is potential second line. So if you could get that late in a draft, you're doing great. Now, what we don't know about this draft is after the second round, how it will do compared to like 03, because that's where 03 cleaned up. Even Justin Braun was in 03, right? Like, I don't, so there was crazy guys. Kevin Klein was a guy who was on the Rangers, and I interviewed him once. I was at a book signing with him when I did a Ranger book, and he was like, I was in the 03 draft. I'm like, oh yeah, you were. And like, he was deep in the, he was like 6th round or something like that. And so we'll see how this one does compared to that one. But the 03 draft was also in Carolina, so in Nashville. So it'll be interesting to see if it strikes again. But first round's definitely super deep.
That's funny that guys kind of take pride in that, later on. Oh, it was a part of this draft, that was one of the best drafts of all time.
Like it's been talked about as kind of like a legendary draft, right? So
yeah, that's cool. Very cool. All right, number 8. So this guy's kind of picked up some steam amongst Flyers fans, and I'll credit Dan Silver for that, kind of talking him up the last couple weeks. But Oliver Moore, and everything that you watch from him is like, he's everything the Flyers kind of need right now. And Oliver Moore is the speed, not selfish with the puck, right? I think you guys said he gets his teammates involved, and hey, that's great when you have a couple guys that can put the puck in the net. I'm thinking Owen Tippett, Tyson Forster when he's here, Travis Konechny. A guy like Oliver Moore might fit right in. What do you think about Oliver Moore?
Yeah, I really like him. I think he can be a center. Remember, again, when it gets to draft time, a lot of players and agents push guys as centers. Even if they're not playing it that season, they played center. It's a sexy thing to tell a team you could be a center, and they'll determine whether they think you can be or not, right? But at the end of the day, like, Travis Konechny was listed as a center in his draft, and I kind of knew he would never play center, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think Moore can, because Moore is good on faceoffs already. He is good middle of the ice, really good puck distributor, very good vision, terrific shot. Elite speed. I a lot of times I will do the anonymous scout quote in like an article, and one scout just said, yeah, maybe the best fastest skater in the draft.
Wow.
And while I'm not ready to make that proclamation yet, maybe close to the draft I would. Everything else checks out, and I've seen him in a bunch of different situations, and he's always come through, and he's cool as a cucumber. So, yeah, would he be a great pick? He absolutely would be a great pick. There's no question about it. If they go 9th, is he going to be there? Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be.
That's just the reality.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like, once we hit Oliver Moore, when you're talking about if you're at 9, 10, or 11, which they could be, you're not getting Oliver Moore. You're just not.
So let me ask you this question. Obviously, you have the 4, which are in another class, let's say.
Well, I'll say the 1 is in another class, and then 2, 3, and 4 are in their own class after that.
Okay. Yeah, certainly I would agree. Where's the next dip in talent? Like, is it Benson?
Yeah, I think there's a dip after Benson and Smith. I think those 2 guys are just not quite at the Fantilli, Carlson, Michkov level, but they're ahead of everybody else.
Okay.
And they're ahead of everybody else because, and I'll get to why when we get there, but they're ahead of everybody else in my eyes.
Okay, sure.
And I don't think that's going to change.
All right, interesting. So
I'm
we'll
pretty
get there.
stubborn about the top 6 at this point. I doubt it's going to change.
I think rightly so. So at 7, this guy had a huge day today in today's U18 tournament. Dalibor Dvorsky, not just a hat trick.
Because I just came back from vacation.
Oh, sorry, I don't want to ruin anything.
No, it's fine. It's on my DVR, and it's all good. I was already getting called an idiot for having him at 7 before this tournament, so I must be a real big idiot now.
Wow. So 7 is. I got to say, I thought it was the perfect spot for him because I've seen him go as late as,
that a week ago. You could go look at my timeline.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So talk about Dvorsky a little bit. He seems like an interesting prospect here.
He's an interesting one. He's one that I'm not sure the Flyers would have the guts to take. And the reason I say the guts is because while they did have a little bit of risk with Gauthier, if he turned into a center, the rest of Gauthier is not a risk. I mean, he's a guaranteed NHLer. Dvorsky is the kind of guy where he's going to play in the NHL. What you don't know is, will the offense match everything else that he can do? Because he could be a physical guy. He's definitely a good center. I like his defensive game. Now, again, I had some guy from AIK taking umbrage with me because someone asked who are the 2 best defensive prospects in the draft, and I said he's one of them. And they were like, how could you say that? I watch him all the time. What row do you sit in? And I'm like, dude, this is the 21st century. I've got Instat, which has every game. I get all kinds of shifts. I get all these situational videos. Plus, I've watched him in tournament play, and I've seen him. Actually, I didn't see him live this year. I didn't, but I've seen him in a lot of tournament play. And so you look at him and I say, the problem is you are looking at him playing up in age and being super critical of this guy. And I'm telling you, in his age group, he's really good defensively and he's ahead of everybody physically. And that's usually, and if you watch him today and he did well, you could probably just, shake your head and tell me if that was part of his game, because it usually is. Plus, he's got a great shot, which again, maybe didn't translate as much in AIK because he's playing up in age. They're asking him to play more of a well-rounded game, and he's trying to sort of, find his footing. But when he plays in international play, he's always the best player on his team, and he's not usually on a great team. So he's got to struggle more to find his openings, and he still finds them.
Yeah, I think you're gonna like tonight's game. He had himself a game in perfect timing,
Yeah.
So I'm sure we'll be talking about tonight's game next week about Dalibor Dvorsky. I just love the name. You ever come across a draft and you're just like, man, that's a guy. He's going to make it in the NHL just because of the name. Dalibor,
well, I thought that there was a guy that I'm pretty sure Carolina drafted him. Michael Jordan. Didn't happen. He didn't and you had the battle of the Sebastian Ahos. They did make it.
There you go.
So that's good. So yeah, every once in a while though, you find some names and you're like, yeah, that's a great name.
There was a referee.
There's a few coming. Ozzy Wiesblatt, I really hope makes it. I think Ozzy's great. That would be an awesome thing. So we'll see if Ozzy can make it. He's a really good player.
Did he go to Carolina as well? I don't remember where he went.
Where did Ozzy go?
Was it Seattle, maybe? It sounds like a Seattle name.
Let's see. I'd like to say I can remember everybody. San Jose, that's right. He's
okay.
Yeah, 31st overall. Really good pick. He his mom is deaf, so there's a whole family dynamic that I wrote about there, which is impressive.
Oh, wow.
41 points in 43 games this year, 10 goals, 31 assists. He's a decent player. I think he is going to make it.
Ozzy, there you go. Yeah, that's a pretty good first year. All right, so speaking of, popular, names here, celebrity names, you have at number 6, Will Smith. And, I think this is the highest that I've seen him ranked, and rightly so. Can you talk about why you have Will Smith at 6 here?
Yeah. So it's easy to knock guys in drafts and point out their faults, right?
Sure.
And I think what happens is over the course of a season, people talk themselves out of certain players, whether they do rankings or whether they just decide who they want their team to draft. So if somebody reads that, hey, we're not sure about Will Smith's defense, or we don't think his defense is great, on two different sites, that may color someone's opinion, right? I don't have a problem with Will Smith's defense. I'm not telling you it's great, but I'm telling you it's not a detriment either. I have seen him cover for it. And actually, he made it a point to play a super solid defensive game at the All-American Prospects game when there was like 100 scouts there. That was the best defensive game I'd seen him play. And you could say it's an all-star game, but that game had a lot of hitting too. So that was something that told me, okay, he may have had some defensive gaffes early in the season, like guys will, but he cleaned it up. And that's not the part of the game that you need to worry about Will Smith. Will Smith, it's the puck, when it's on his stick, it could be magic. And he's got really good speed. Now, he is a guy that's very much like Panarin, where, you know, for a period and a half, you're like, man, where's Will Smith? I don't really see him out there. And, you know, when the puck's touching him and he's making plays, but it's not like it's not going in. It's not going in. But he's a guy that never gives up, and he's a guy that's always pushing. Then all of a sudden, you know, you see like a goal and 2 assists in a period, or a big goal, a go-ahead goal, or those kinds of things. And all of a sudden the momentum's rolling for this guy, and now the other team doesn't know what to do with Will Smith. That's what he does. And he did that in at least 4 out of the 5 viewings I had of him this year. And that's just live. I've seen him in other situations too. I know he had a big game the other night, but it's a prelim. So I'm like, I don't even care what they have 12 goals, Team USA in a prelim. Like, fine, whatever. That's like a warm-up. But as far as Will Smith goes, it's good for him because I think he still needs, for whatever reason, not for me, to prove to other people that he can be an elite player. And I think he's there. I do think he could be a top-line center. And I think once you get to 5, you have to decide whether you want Smith or Benson. I think that's a tough decision because they're both centers. Smith's a little bigger. He's kind of lean right now, but I think he can put on a little more muscle. Benson's actually, you know, pretty well put together for his size, very feisty, maybe the smartest player in the draft. And Benson's kind of like a field general out there. He's a great two-way player. He doesn't do a lot wrong, and he does a lot right. And a lot of it happens at 5-on-5. It's not all power play. Same with Smith. A lot happens for Smith 5-on-5. And those kinds of things, there's, you know, an advantage to that and an emphasis, I think, on that. So you look at those two and you're like, wow, to me, that's a tough decision.
Yeah.
That's a really tough decision.
So if the Flyers are drafting 7th and Will Smith is there, is he your guy?
Yeah. Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing that would change it is it Smith or Benson there? Because then I still might take Benson.
Okay.
But that's it. I mean, at that point, that's my decision. And I never look back. Like, I'm fine. I go into the media session and have to answer, you know, to jerks like me.
Furthest thing from a jerk, by the way.
What I think about him, but I would be fine. I would make that pick every time. But
so
I'm talking to people, and nobody thinks right now he's going to be around after 6.
Yeah, I think that was going to be my question. Is this negative talk on him more of a fan thing and scouts and teams?
I think it's a fan thing, and I think it's with some other pundits, but I don't think it's with scouts.
So Columbus GM, I got to make sure. Let me just make sure. So I don't know if he said it himself, but I was reading an Adam Portzline tweet, or I didn't end up reading his article, but in the article he had mentioned that I believe Columbus would consider taking Will Smith as far up as 4. Do you see that as a possibility?
I mean, with Yarmo, he's proved that. I mean, he takes players where he takes players. And the one thing I like about Yarmo is if Will Smith is his guy, then Will Smith's his guy. And it doesn't matter where he takes him at that point. You know, Pierre-Luc Dubois was his guy. And he was right about him. He turned him into a center. He's a really good center. So to me, if I'm drafting for a team, even if I have a guy differently on a board, if this is my guy, that's the guy I'm pushing for. I don't care what spot he's in. And the best example I can give you is there was a scout named Christer Rockstrom and he was with the Rangers. And from the first round to the 7th round, he was pushing for Henrik Lundqvist. So it wasn't just like, hey, the Rangers finally drafted Lundqvist in the 7th round. And he was the second goalie taken by the Rangers in that draft. He wasn't the top goalie taken by the Rangers in that draft. So he was arguing for him every round. That's how strong he felt. And then at some point the Rangers just gave in and was just like, fine, here, we'll draft this guy, okay? And and he's the best the franchise has ever seen. The point is, he was pushing for him every round. So I would push for Will Smith the whole time. Like if somebody said, like, it's between Smith and Michkov, yeah, Michkov has a higher ceiling for sure. But I don't know when I'm getting him. I don't know what the situation is, whatever. I'm fine with taking Will Smith. And if clowns like me are going to say, did you take him too early? I'm prepared to answer those questions.
See, I love that because there's some conviction there. There's belief in, I know what I'm doing here, and this is the guy I want.
You have to have that belief. If somebody's your guy, you have to just take that guy. You don't waffle from it. You don't change or move off of that.
Right. I mean, you don't take your guy and then, you have to live with that.
Exactly.
You didn't do what you thought you should have done. So
right.
Love talking prospects with you, Russ. I could talk to you all night. I know we said 20 minutes. We've kept you a little bit over that now. It's a half an hour already. Holy, time flies. So
it's all good.
Yeah, I want to get into the top 5 with you next week, but
okay.
Yeah, a lot to talk about. We look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah, and I tell people, I urge them, take a look at the bottom of that list, like from 30 on, because some of those guys will get bumped from the 2nd round even, and Flyers have 3rd round picks. So, there's going to be some of them in the 3rd round too. So 3rd round's still important in this draft.
Hey, if you have time next week, I mean, we obviously will cover the top 5. You think we can get into the 3rd round a little bit?
Yeah. Sure.
All right, cool. Well, we'll let you go for the night, Russ, and we'll catch up with you next week.
Okay. See you guys.
Thanks, Russ.
Take care. Love that guy. One of the best. And, we're really lucky to have Russ in this area. If you're watching the show now, if you're listening on the podcast, make sure you go over and give Russ a follow on Twitter at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY. Check out Russ's rankings on his site. I think it's sportsology.com. Yep, sportsology.com. He's got a top 45 draft ranking. Guy knows his stuff, right? That's why we like to have him on the show. It's not, there's no BS. There's a lot of prospect guys out there that, they have the ego and the this and that, and this is my guy. But, Russ doesn't really have any of that. He loves what he does and he's good at it. So, it's nice getting him on. What'd you guys think of that? The bottom 5 of the top 10, anything that really stuck out to you there, or anybody that, you didn't think much of before that now you're like, if the Flyers can get this guy, he's the guy I kind of want.
Well, I missed a little bit, but he's pretty confident about Will Smith, who, I mean, that's a name you're starting to hear a lot in Flyers land. So Russ had good things to say about him. I like to hear that. Yeah, apologies. I kind of lagged out there for a little bit, so I missed about 8.
Don't apologize. We'll hold it against you. Don't apologize. We're going to get you back for that later.
It was nice hearing some of the names that weren't really going around Twitter. Like, I know, Jim, you'd been talking about Ryan Leonard. You mentioned how Dan Silver had been talking about Oliver Moore. It was nice to hear about a little more about Dvorsky, to be honest, and he definitely does have a great name. I'm glad that Will Smith was the last one we talked about, because that is the most polarizing one within our drafting abilities this year. So love him or hate him, just keep his wife's name out of your mouth.
Yeah, Dvorsky's an interesting one too.
I didn't want to say it with Russ on the show because he said he DVR'd the game, didn't watch it yet. Guy scored 4 goals today.
Wow.
Dvorsky. And he's a name that I think the Flyers may have to consider on draft day.
I think that's why Russ stayed an extra 10 minutes. He's like, well, Jim just, spoiler alert the game. I might as well hang out a little bit longer.
Yeah. So it's not going to be an easy decision by any means. Obviously, if the Flyers pick 10th, it'll be a little easier because a lot of the guys will be off the board. But if they're picking anywhere from 6 to 9, 10, there's going to be some guys out there. Even Quentin Musty, who a lot of these prospect shows and whatnot that I'm seeing, It's not a guy. He's not like I guess Russ said because he's not from a very media-driven location. I guess people don't really make the travel up to see him. But he's a guy I think is a bit underrated, and I think whoever drafts him is going to be happy with him.
It's just funny to look at these names at this time of year. Last year when we talked to Russ, he had Gauthier ranked around like 9 or 10. And guys rise, teams take a shot, teams reach, you could say reach, but ultimately time will tell. It's interesting to see who will be there. If anything, I took away from this conversation, I really want the Flyers to do and not that they can control it, but just please stay somewhere within the 6-7 range, like as close as possible. I'd rather take a phenomenal chance at somebody dropping, which is very unlikely, but I like that there's always that chance.
Yeah.
Nobody saw Shane, as much as I was not the biggest Shane Wright fan. I don't think anybody saw him fall on the floor. Like those weird. I want to be within that reach for just somebody to go. But also, like, I like the names I heard today. I want to have my choice, not be hoping for one last one. Like, oh, please let the final guy of this tier, find it to us, and then we don't take him anywhere, something like that. So I want to be within the range because I feel like we should have been drafting a lot higher, considering how the season was going. I'm not going to complain about how some players played this year, but we are where we are. I'm just hoping that somehow it falls our way in a sense.
I'm curious for next week what he has to say about Michkov, because personally, I think he's the second best player in the draft. But then you add in the whole Russia fiasco, and it sounds like he's going to be in the KHL for the next 3 years. How far will he slip? I'm curious what Russ has to say about that. I also want to ask him about Sandin Pellikka. He's the number 1 defenseman on Russ's list. I really like the guy. Right-handed shot, can skate, really good passer. I'm curious what he has to say about him. I'm going to ask him about that next week.
That's good. I didn't even realize we didn't talk about the defenseman, and we won't. Because unless you flat out ask about him.
I plan to. I really like the guy.
Yeah, no, and that's great. Mishkov is interesting. I was going to, if we started 1 through 5, I was going to say, is he ranked 4 because you think talent-wise? Because he said his ceiling, he talked about his ceiling a bit, or because of the rusher factor and all that, or a combination of both. Like, I'm just curious why he's got him ranked there.
Mm-hmm.
And I love at the top, it says, here's my April rankings. This is not a mock draft.
Yeah, what was I just going to say with Michkov? He's the Russian Bedard, some people say, which
this time last year people were comparing him to Ovi.
Yeah. And you know what? As soon as this war started, his draft stock fell.
Yeah.
That's what happened. He should be number 2, maybe battling for number 1. But yeah, as soon as this whole, Russia-Ukraine war started, Michkov instantly fell to 4. And
I think if he's available wherever the Flyers pick, if he actually does fall to the Flyers, I'm taking him and I'm running. If he's not here in 3 years, so be it.
Mm-hmm.
You got to take that pick in my eyes.
Yep. I don't think twice.
Yep. A lot can change within 3 years, as we've seen. 3 years ago, the Flyers were in the playoffs. Ripping.
Great times.
Yeah.
Lots changed since then, right?
Oh boy.
What's AV doing?
We don't know. All right, boys. You want to touch on anything else for draft rankings here before we're already past? We're at 9:10 already. Didn't really have too much else to get into tonight. Did you want to touch on anything else before we wrap up?
I think that was a good show.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add is Briere spoke about moving up in the draft. I find it very difficult to move up from 7 to anywhere, even 9 or 10, that top 10. You see that very, very rarely. And he doesn't have a whole lot of ammunition, but with this draft being potentially 2.5, 3 rounds deep, maybe he's talking about moving up from somewhere in the 3rd round into the 2nd. Yeah. That would be very aggressive for me, considering how well they think this draft could be. If he had more ammunition, maybe we could see more fireworks, but he just doesn't, thanks to Fletcher. So, hey, more power to him.
Yep. Yeah, I'm curious. Like, even Russ said it, like, that 1st round's deep. When I hopped back on, I heard him talking about the 2003 draft a little bit. I mean, I don't know what Russ said, but from things I've heard, that's the comparison. Like, this is supposed to be a draft like that. I'm hoping Provorov is traded and you can get a first this year. And I don't know how far Sanheim's stock is dropped, but I really have to consider that as well. If you can get a couple first-round picks in this draft, you could really, what's the word? Not revamp, but like you could really get this rebuild going.
Bolster it.
Stock the cupboard, baby. But yeah, that's just it. Like what he said was not just like it was the first round stack, but the 03 draft, like the whole draft was ridiculous. And he was like, once you get past that third round, we'll see how much they measure up. And I was like, well, we got some picks later, 2/3, 2/4, 2/6. Like, not that I plan on them hitting on anybody there, but like I just felt like wishful thinking unless a major trade happened or they get back into the first round, but maybe they can get they can move into the late second and snag a guy, or I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how good Brett Flair really is, I guess.
I do think there's a chance they could get another first. If Provorov's traded before the draft, I would expect a first in return.
Draft's interesting, yeah.
It might be towards the back
here,
end. It might be a contending team, but I would expect the Flyers to get another first out of there.
Dude, yeah. I'm looking towards the back end here, and there's players all the way. I'm looking all the way back to 29, 30. Yeah, I mean, they can get a guy. And that's talking if they trade with whoever makes the Final Four. I'm looking. I mentioned Jaden Perron already. He's a smaller guy, which a lot of people know that I hold it against guys, which maybe wrongly so. But I have a thing for bigger men. If you're the little guys, I kind of hold the size against them a little bit. Sorry, I'm not sorry, but that's just what I like in a player. I like a little bit of size. Sue me. So, but Perron, when I watch him play, he plays bigger than he is. So, I also like that too. Kalem Ritchie is a guy. Lukas Dragicevic, people talk about. There's all kinds of players back here. We'll get to more next week. I don't want to ruin anything. So make sure you guys got your questions ready. If you're watching the show live, make sure you bring some questions next week for Russ. We'll keep them on a little bit longer. We'll get them to answer some of your questions. And so we'll call this one a night. Everybody, thanks for hanging out. A lot of fun. Good talking to Russ. We'll talk to him again next week. So everybody, make sure you're drinking your green stuff. Take your vitamins. Go watch the NHL playoffs. You're free. The Stanley Cup Playoffs. Is that a pet peeve of anybody's? If somebody calls it the NHL Playoffs instead of the Stanley Cup Playoffs?
I don't know if I've ever noticed it, to be honest.
It's one of mine. It's the Stanley Cup Playoffs, ladies and gentlemen. All
right, so ice hockey playoffs.
Everybody, go enjoy the rest of your night. That's going to do it for this episode. We'll be back next week with Russ Cohen. Thank you and good night.
Dominic Roussel.